I'm Boris Bally, and I come here from Providence, Rhode Island. And thanks to James Thurman, and I'm happy to be here at UNT and share kind of my life voyage with you. And because you're students, I think it really relates. I would rather than to show you kind of the end result of my career, I would rather show you the process, which is something that I think where you are right now in your careers is something you can appreciate. I thought that was a tricky title. Hugh Manufactured Scrap, the New Gold. This is me when I was 14 after my first jewelry class. Long-haired hippie freak, and I fell in love with metals. And one of the things that I really love about the field of metals that has always kept me is that it's something that you learn from mentors, and it's almost your responsibility to pass on, which is part of the reason why I love coming here, and especially the reason why because of James having been my student, and here I am again. It just proves that it's come full circle. So one of the things that's always fascinated me about metals is how difficult it is to work, and also the amount of kind of intrinsic value. As I learned as an apprentice a goldsmith, I learned about the value of gold and precious metal, and that's something I've always wanted to kind of poke fun at. A good friend of mine is pretty famous for this saying, trash is the failure of imagination, Aaron Kramer. I always think that's a beautiful way to kind of enter into this. And even though I'm trained in kind of the technical standard jewelry training, I've always wanted to look beyond that. And I'm sorry about the slide being a little screwy, but as I present this to you, I'm thinking, how can I make sense of my decisions in my life? And this is kind of how you create a good foundation, which is what you're all doing here right now. It's creating the foundation to build the house. You have to have a plan. You have to have the want to be here to learn, to create something. And then you go on a quest and you try to find out what it is that you want to do. So now that you've got all this information, what are you going to do with it? And then once you've kind of found a direction, you have to start creating some kind of a language that is your personality, and you start developing this language. Then comes a very realistic goal, especially once you're out of school, is you have to learn how to survive on all this. You either have to teach, or you have to sell your work, or somehow get it out there enough to sustain you. And then you have to remember that it's a life, and you're supposed to have fun. So it can't always be serious. And I'll see, yeah, there we go. So the foundation. Now, I'll preface this by saying I think I'm one of the luckiest guys I've ever met, and a lot of luck actually comes from a lot of hard work and placing yourself in luck's path. One of the lucky things was the foundation that I was able to have, and one of the most important pivotal things was that I happened to be born to two Swiss parents. One was a fiber artist. My mom, Doris, made the Doris, right? Isn't that ironic? Doris was a tapestry artist. That was her piece down below. And my father is an industrial designer, and he designed the RoboGrip pliers. So I became like this hybrid. I was the first in our generation to be born in America to Swiss parents. My first language was Swiss, yet I speak American English. My father was real right brain, and my mom was very left brain. So I became like this hybrid of all these things. And then pivotal was that after high school, I was able to score an apprenticeship with my goldsmith master, Alexander Schaffner, who was in the middle of writing a book on the apprentice system. So he took me on after not too much hesitation, which surprised me because the Swiss people are pretty snobby about the Americans' lack of skill. Not talent, but skill. But he did take me on, and I think what he was thinking is if he can teach basically a naive American to master these skills, then he's been a good teacher. So his skills, I have to say, were mad crazy, detailed things that I've taken with me through life. I wouldn't even be standing up here if it wasn't for him kind of passing on this information to me. Just to get inside my head a little bit and to share this with you, this is kind of Swiss. This is what Swiss people do. This is the cable of the Rhine ferry. It goes across the Rhine River in Basel, that my cousin, ironically, is now the ferryman there. Now, I thought this detail summed up Germanic Swiss people, in that in this country they would either move the cable somewhere else, erect the building, but no, there they had it exactly at this place, and that building's been up there for 700 years. We need to carve out exactly where the cable goes. It's crazy. It's sick, and that stuff sits inside me. Another reason why I'm here is because later in my career, I happened to luck into two amazing mentors. One is Johanna Dahm, who happened to be a Swiss family friend who used to come when she'd exhibit in this country and come hang out with my parents and stay there, and she would let me touch her jewelry that she'd bring here to display. So it was a very kind of intimate way to get to know jewelry. And she then went on to become the head of the jewelry department in Pforzheim, Germany, which is very notorious for being an excellent program. And then Tom Mann, who's here on the right, when I was 15 or 16, I had my first craft show. I was really hell-bent on making some money on this and trying, and he had the booth next to me, a couple booths down, and he was surrounded by beautiful women making penis earrings and smoking dope. And I thought, oh my God, this guy is so cool. Someday I want to be just like him, which I don't anymore. It's not happening. But anyway, we've managed to remain good friends for now 35 some years. And he's been my gallery director in the meantime. He's bought work of mine for his gallery. We see each other at SNAG conferences, at the New York Gift Show. It's really kind of cool. And that's the thing that's kept me in this field, is the constant mentorship and the family. Jack Pripslide on the left, he's one of the most influential influences on me because he was one of the first people to hybridize design and metal craft. And he headed the RISD metals department for a long time when it thrived. And my professor, Carol Kamada, who taught me at Carnegie Mellon, who was very sculptural in her thinking, trained as a jeweler, but sculptural in her execution. So having been mentored like this, I realized the responsibility on me to take in young blood, as I once took James Thurman in. Because if we don't do that, the field will die. And one of the people that has really helped me get into museums and has totally kind of opened the doors wide is Bob Ebbendorf, whose piece is down below. He came to my studio one day and he saw something in me, and ever since then, people have paid attention to things I've made. Just a magical, lucky, wonderful happenstance. So the next step is desire, dream, forge a plan, and build a sanctuary. So many of you studio artists, our big dream is to have this amazing studio, as my dream as well. Having worked in the basement, ratty little stinky basement most of my life, I've always wanted to not work in a ratty stinky basement. So the one way to get there is to actually actively create kind of a mission statement, a life plan, 5-year plan, 10-year, 25-year plan. As ridiculous as that sounds, is probably the best thing I ever did, kind of working backwards from where I envision my life. And ironically, this is my studio, guys. $30,000 bought this building. On the left is it in its shambled form, and I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and money, and I have the most amazing studio. And it's truly, truly amazing. That's how happy I was when I got that table. I've always wanted to have a 16-foot long work table where nothing's on it and everything can be on it, everything can be worked on it, and that's what I now have. I had an interview from the Smithsonian Institution for the archives, came through and interviewed me there, and she said, and she's somebody who's seen a lot of studios because she does the interviews, she said, "This is one of the nicest studios I've ever been in." And I was like, yes! So this is the more serious look. But this is actually what the studio looks like today. I hang my chairs that I make from the ceiling as storage. It's always a buzz and a bustle. I got shelving to put in boxes, and I work in a traffic sign medium, so I have to store tons of signs everywhere. And I am so tooled out. I have amazing tools. And so my dream was have a studio where I can make whatever I want, whenever I want. And even though I have acquired that place, now I'm being kind of consumed by the volume of things I actually have to make. So it's kind of bittersweet. That's as James puts it, my happy place, the bench. The bench, with a tool in my hand. I mean, I think, anybody who's in our field or in the crafts at all, or in visual arts, you'd love to have that thing that you create with in your hand. And the sad truth of it is, I'd say probably 80% of why I'm even able to come up here and talk to you is because 80% of the time I'm doing my books or trying to rustle up work or manage employees. It's become a business. But that's what it takes to be able to have the time when you do have that precious studio time. So the next thing is the quest. And what you want to find is a vocabulary, kind of search, what am I going to do with my life now that I've been educated? I never got an MFA, so I'm guessing this is part of what you explore in getting an MFA is, well, now that I have the skills, what am I going to do intellectually with my work? So having eloped to Boston after undergrad, and I started working as a model maker, and I thought, what am I going to do? All right, the best way to catch fish is to throw out lots of hooks. So I realized I really love working with people and teaching, so I've got to keep that door open. I got to start that. So I taught at some little ratty, after hours place, which in turn ended up leading me to assistant professor at a university. So all this stuff ends up going somewhere, even though you don't know it at the time. That was one area. The other areas maybe develop some furniture or some installation. The other area was develop a line of jewelry that's sellable. Another is develop one-of-a-kind something that can end up being exhibited and shown in galleries. So my thought on it was, if I continue each one of these different veins, every year revisit a certain thing, certain theme that's happening in this. Each year that I visit like a set of flatware or a piece of jewelry with the new inspiration, it becomes this upward spiral where you've learned something new because you've already made a piece of jewelry and now you're adding a little bit of new inspiration. So I actually did this under Carol Kamada. I entered a silver competition. This I called Sliding Perfections. And the reason why the title is kind of funny because it had slight imperfections. And I didn't get into the competition, and I was like, screw you, this is my masterpiece. I've spent so many hours on this. I can't believe I didn't get in, but I realized this really kind of speaks to the whole Swiss Army knife thing, a little organized, a little trinkety sort of stuff that fits together. So that kind of started the whole interest in flatware. That was my very first piece of flatware, which is called Point and Shoot, which was a hybrid between wearing something and eating. And it's stupid, it's ugly, but it really was fun, and it made me realize that when you combine two dissimilar elements, you can often end up with something really funny going on or something really interesting. And in this case, that holds true for bringing the street concrete to precious material. So I'm always keeping my eye out for different inspirations. One of the things that I was missing in the vacuum of being, excuse me, being out of school is that I didn't have any more mentorship. So lo and behold, right around, I'd say 1986, five or six, David Tisdale, who came out of the metals program at SDSU, came out with this brilliant flatware set on the left. He sort of became a mentor without knowing me or me knowing him, but I thought, oh my God, flatware, that's amazing. And what he wanted to do, which I really applauded him on, is he brought jewelry to everybody's tabletop. He made it accessible, affordable, useful. And I thought, that's great, but that's not my spin right now. What I want to do is I want to bring jewelry to the tabletop. So I kind of took his idea and I brought it my way and turned it into ebony and silver. And I also, in the process of painstakingly making these sets, I realized that I needed to learn about production. So I started teaching myself how to produce these things. And then just like that spiral, the next year I realized, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to find? And I would just look around my environment. Oh my God, what am I going to come up with? What's the next idea? And I would look up where I'm getting my torch tanks filled, and it would be the architectural elements of the ceiling, of the roof, holding up the roof, and lo and behold, it would work its way into the flatware. And then this is 2 series later, it was the year of the I-beams. Everything had I-beams and was constructed and fabricated and looked very kind of bulldozer-ish. And basically, if you're catching that I love to play, to design, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just kind of having some fun with the things that are all around me that most people overlook. This was funny, and I think James might have even been here for this. No, actually, I don't think it was James, but this was really funny because when I brought this home, the prototype for this, my wife said, "Oh my God, finally you're designing something gorgeous and useful. It's a kitty litter scoop." It's like, oh. So it's my $4,000 kitty litter scoop. And it's actually a serving set that's way overscale. So when you're serving, you're like the king. You get to play with your toys, and everybody's watching before you serve them. So, and that's the newest set. So this is, again, 5 years later, I perfected some of the things I learned from the last one I fixed on this. This was the year of the perforation. So at one point, I started stretching things. I was looking for inspiration. I looked into a table that I was working on that was made out of expanded material with a glass top. And I thought, oh my God, I've got it. It's the year of the expansion. So I took a hydraulic press and made a pull instead of press. And so the vessel forms that I started using dealt with perforations and the physical forces of raising and how it relates to these perforations. And the flatware like this, a lot of the jewelry had this in it. This is me being silly during a class. This is our final critique at Haystack when we all had a final critique over lobster, Haystack School of Crafts. The class was called Lobster Crackers and Picks. And we all got kind of cracked at the final critique, so it wasn't such a great plan. This is one of my favorite courses to teach, teaching flatware making. And in this case, I think the most successful part, the one on the left, is actually sabotaged cafeteria ware out of stainless. And this was a recent course, maybe 2 years ago now, that I taught, where I made, what do I call these? Wind meals. Wind meals. I had a little competition with the students. I said, name the set. And it was funny because I ended up making these for my kids for their lunches. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get my kids thrown out of school for having martial arts weapons in here. But it didn't happen, luckily. But this is also, so that's one series. It's kind of the flatware series. Every few years, incrementally changing, learning, being inspired by whatever the genre is of the year. This is the series of one of those veins with the spiral that is the wearable, the jewelry that is sculptural jewelry. The one down below was actually, and I had just met my wife who was in medical school. She was very interested in AIDS. Right now she's an AIDS physician. And just at that time, AIDS had hit, and they were working on a cure with AZT. And I got together with an AIDS activist, Ben Cunningham, and we made this piece kind of reminiscent of a centrifuge. So one of the vials is filled with blood, one is filled with AZT, and one is filled with semen. Oh! And if you think about it, this is in the public collection at the Worcester Museum of Arts. Can you imagine what this looks like now? It's like poison, yuck, fermenting, ugh. And by the way, just for the record, it was Ben's semen. I was the blood guy. Thought that would. So that kind of launched this whole series. And a lot of the thing, I'm driven a lot by challenges. And one of the challenges came up was that Joe Wood and Dan Jost put on a show called Jewelry's Epiphanies, which is the first traveling show I'd ever been invited to. So I wanted to make something really, really spectacular. So I started this whole series of these way oversized, totally unwearable forms, that sculpture for the arm. And this one was kind of like a medieval torture device. Somebody asked me in an earlier class about the lathe dog, which is up there on the left, as kind of an inspiration. And then the fixating arm form on the right and constrictor arm form on the left. Now, I think what I really wanted to do is kind of strut my stuff of all the Swiss stuff I'd learned and see if I could pull this off, this kind of medical-looking paraphernalia sculpture. And did you guys ever hear Tommy, the movie Tommy by The Who? They have the acid queen, and she like puts people in coffins and shoves all these needles in. That kind of was something that I love that movie, and that kind of ties into it. And also right around that time, I met Lynn in med school, and I was pouring through her medical catalogs, her different volumes that she had to learn. And one of the devices, like the one on the right, was from a fixating head device after a spinal surgery. They put you in that. I used to be really into motorcycles and cars, and this is based on a leaf spring of an automobile. Not that, but I thought it was cool. It relates, right? That's actually, I think, to peel an orange or something. And I saw that after I made the ring and thought, oh, cool. So this is based on a car suspension. And actually, I think the guy is cooler than the ring. And actually, that was pivotal in that I learned that, jewelry is really about people. People are the canvas for the jewelry. So I started incorporating more shots of people into it. And he's one of the guys that I hired, when I was doing a big, huge job for Comedy Central. It was just basically a street guy that needed some work. And then I saw he had great tattoos. I said, come model for me. I'll give you $100. So one of the things that drives my work is very process-oriented. In this case, I used to, when I was starting out a little bit older than you are now, I realized that I couldn't afford a lot of the machines and tools, the bigger ones that I wanted to play with, so I'd go to auctions. I'd scour the paper for auctions, and I'd show up, and I'd be like this little kid with $10 in his pocket, and I would get the coolest stuff. And one of the cool things I got was a hydraulic press. And at that time, Susan Kingsley hadn't written her book yet, and I didn't even know that people were already exploring this, and I didn't realize that I should probably be doing this jewelry scale. So I started making big, huge platters. And this is one of the first things that started making me money when I do the craft shows. New Year's cards. James Thurman's filed plenty of these himself. I used to make 1,000 of these like an insane idiot every New Year's and mail them to all my friends to kind of spread the love. If you think about it, it's really the stupidest time to add another 1,000-something to your workload right around the holidays. So this is the very last one. It's 4 when my wife and I had a son and a daughter, and there's 4, and we're stable. There ain't going to be no more kids. That's it. So it's symbolic. So I took that into jewelry, and again, this is a play on dealing with kind of anti-precious. It's becoming a reverse alchemist. It's taking something deemed intrinsically valuable and kind of spitting on it or running a track through it, turning it to mud. And I called these, what did I call these? Oh gosh, I don't even remember. Tire wear, no, it was treadwear, thank you. Wow, you're good. Treadwear. And this kind of developed out of being very reclusive in my studio and working, and not wanting to answer the door just because my friend wants to go out and party, but then being curious enough to find out once I knew they were gone who it might have been. Was it FedEx? Was it my friend? Was it? So I'd go out there and I'd read the tracks in the mud, and I was like, boing, there's inspiration. So culturally, my family, Switzerland, I think it has like the highest per capita of alcoholism. So we love to drink a lot. And one of the ways that we, I'm sure, excuse it is that we have long siestas at noon, 2-hour siestas. You go home from work, you hang out, you have some glasses of wine, you hang out with your family, and that's when you eat your big meal. So I noticed on the tables, they would have their coats of arms, there on the table, and I thought, that's the perfect place to have, to appreciate art is, over a glass of wine with your family or friends, with a pedestal of the bottle. So I started this whole series, and this pretty much launched me. The sale of these launched me into being able to sustain my own studio. The form itself is based on an African from Zaire thumb piano called kalimba. So I would make these. I was maybe, oh gosh, how old was I? 24. And I was working as a model maker, and I found a gallery in Manhattan that would take my stuff, and I would make maybe one a week, and they would have a show, and I'd have maybe 12, and they'd sell up to about $2,000 a pop. And I was able to explore how to make stuff, use materials, learn to use lathe, use gold, use silver, use oxidized brass, and they would sell faster than I could make them. And it was like insta cash. And at one point, they were selling so many. Before the opening, they had this one collector that had a vineyard in California. She would fly in the day before. I never met her. She'd pull up in her limo, say, I want that, and that, and put red dots, and they'd all be sold before the opening. It was like, oh my God, this is like a dream. So, and then right around that time, Vogue magazine did something on me. And I still get this all the time. This is really cute. People always say, you know, Boris, you're so good. Someday maybe you'll be in Vogue. And I'm like, been there, done that. So, and not that that's important. It's just funny. It's like, come on. But this was, I think it was 1987 or 8. Anyway, that helped kind of lubricate the sales and stuff. But so the important thing is that I was able to play with the tools that I was slowly getting in my studio. The one on the left is called caltrop, based after a medieval weapon that they used to shoot out of their cannons, and one spike would always end up and kind of disarm horse riders. And it's actually made out of discarded rocket nose cones. So I'd go beachcombing and I'd find all these plastic things after 4th of July, and I'd cast them in silver and machine them together, solder them, fabricate them together. And you can actually flick it and it turns around. In the middle of the slide on the right is actually a money counting thing they use in banks. And turned ebony. I think the one on the right, it looks like a radio tower. The middle thing is like from a kid's bubble gum container. So one of the things I realized is I don't want to get stale, so I always have to find a new thing or challenge something. One of the challenges anybody can do is change the scale of an idea. So in this case, I love the visual kind of poetry of the kalimba thumb piano turned bottle stopper. And in this case, I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a huge candelabra. And at this point, this thing is probably, I don't know, 6 feet. And I'd never made something this big. For me at the time, it was a huge challenge. And I put it, brilliantly enough, as you can see from this slide, I put it on precision bearings. So I had these left over from my skateboard days. I was like, ooh, I want to make something that moves. But if you think about it, how stupid is that? Hot wax and movement, duh. So maybe a batiker could use it to decorate the walls. But anyway, obviously, if I had to do this again, I'd have learned a lesson. Make them all kind of deal with the centrifugal force and maybe move, each of the candles move or something. Plus, it's got to have a motor. So this is the very first vessel form that I ever made. And you all know the difference between a vessel and, what do they say, the vessel and a pot is about $1,000. Well, this is definitely not worth $1,000. So I guess it's a pot. So this, I made this on a whim after coming home from a scrapyard, finding all the sheet metal stuff, and I just started slapping this together. I was blessed with my family that loved to travel. They took me to Haiti in '84. During this time, a baby Doc Duvalier was in power, and it was kind of a creepy place to go in that the government had a lot of, they had tonton macoute and machine guns, and people vanished, disappeared. But we were Swiss, so my parents are psycho. They rented a car and just drove on their own through the countryside, and occasionally we get a machine gun in our faces. But we got to see stuff that I think not normal tourists would see because of that. And one of the mysterious things that we saw were these mysterious huts in the middle of the country somewhere. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I realized at that point, you know what, I do like the idea of production. I better learn how to draft. And at this time, this was before CAD kind of came out. So my father is a designer, so I would do these, and I would show my dad and say, you know, is this how you would draft? I mean, is this right? And he would give me a couple pointers. So I taught myself, and I'm sure draftsmen would look at this and say they're the ugliest things they've ever seen, but for my purposes, they were perfect. So again, this is a series over the span of maybe a decade, each time incrementally changing something or thematically changing something. In this case, I was into some more Japanese sort of aesthetic, even though you see a Greek water tower over there. And in this case, I also wanted to learn how to make multiples of varying scale. And backing up to that initial set of flatware I made, this is the die that I pressed the spoon bowl with. And if you're smart in the studio, if you're making a die, you figure what else can I do with it? And this is what else I did with it. I made a salt shaker. Now this is where I started realizing, whoa, I could maybe be called a silversmith. I'm learning how to work silver. I don't have a clue with what I'm doing. I'm just kind of teaching myself. So I made the pepper shaker, and then I entered Fortunate enough, had 3 competitions, and I entered the first one way over my head. I'd never worked silver, but they wanted to have a design, and if they liked your design, they would pay for the silver. So I entered, and I got rejected with this was the design that I submitted a drawing of, and I got rejected. And I thought, screw you. I'm going to make it anyway. Who needs your damn silver? So I made it out of brass. This thing's about 18 inches tall. It's called Incubus. And I actually really liked it, and I felt proud of it. And that's why I said, I don't need that to do it. And the next year I think it was the last year that you could enter, I entered this along with the other slides that were rejected last time, and I got in. And I won second place, and they paid for the silver. And then I sold the piece, and I got on the cover of a magazine. I thought, oh my God, it's a really important lesson. You should never worry about what somebody thinks. You should enter as many things as possible and just be tenacious as hell. And I think that's one of the character flaws that has helped me in my career is that I'm naive as all hell in that I think that I can do anything. And then I'm tenacious that once I actually find out how difficult it is, I just won't quit till it's done. My wife is Jewish, and when we married, I decided, I was actually invited into a menorah exhibition in New York City, and I thought, any other circumstance, I'd think it'd be kind of phony, but since I'm now married to a Jewish person, I'm going to make a menorah, so I made. But I had to have a funny twist, and the lighter candle, which is called the shamash, is the central thing. I had to put it in a very manly way. So this is called manorah. And every time I enter this in a show, they write menorah, and I cross it out and say, no, this is the manorah. But isn't this like a motorcycle exhaust or something? I just love it. Anyway, just different things. I started playing with silversmithing. This is the last thing I did for a Cooper Hewitt show. This is now in the collection of the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. It's pretty much the last of my silversmithing stuff. And you can see that was the year of the truss. You can see the little truss stuff coming out. So the new material vocabulary, new alchemy. Your trash can become someone's gold. Celebrating 868 years, which is when the alchemists thrived in the medieval days. I'm kind of poking fun at that. Like, here I am doing it the wrong way some 900 years later. So Andy Warhol comes from Pittsburgh. His brother, who's here, Paul Warhol, was actually one of my first scrapyards that I went to. And I think it's really poetic that, and Andy went to Carnegie Mellon. He didn't graduate, although they offered him a degree after he died, and he kind of left and with the middle finger and raised. But so I thought it was poetic that all this Pittsburgh, Midwest, pop stuff kind of came back through my work. This is kind of like the new venue. So being Swiss are quietly, unbeknownst to everybody, more famous for being amazingly frugal. I know they say that about Scottish people. I have never witnessed it. I don't know what they're talking about, but the Swiss, they save everything. They can't throw anything out. They recycle. They've been recycling since day one. And so my parents would always say, you need to work with what you've got. And that was a very valuable lesson. Our saying in my household, my grandmother knitted me a pillow that had this saying. It was, use it up, wear it out, make it do without. And that was kind of our family's motto. If I said to my dad, hey, Dad, I smashed the car, he'd say, fix it. And if I'd say, Dad, I don't know how, I can't fix it, he'd say, no car. So, which is a really good way to learn how to work not only with scrap, but also with things that broke and combine stuff. I made a dragster when I was a kid out of recycled stuff. Most families would go to the zoo on field trips. My family actually went to the scrapyard. So this is all recycled cork. So I've been flirting with this idea, never in the spotlight, all my life, kind of finding stuff to make skateboard blanks out of and stuff like that. So one of the things that I learned, I have to totally credit my father for having put that vocabulary of going to scrapyards into me, that I would even have a traffic sign in my studio to begin with in the first place. I got a commission to make a fireplace set for the Society of Arts and Crafts around 1991, and this is the very, very first piece that I ever raised, and that's what my belly actually used to look like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Anyway, I needed to raise a form that I'd fill with concrete. So I started raising it, and I had that just aha moment, like, oh my God, look what I'm doing. This thing told me to do something, and I'm smashing it to hell. God, I love it. It's so bad. It's so right. And then that kind of, after we made this piece and filled it with concrete so you couldn't see it, it started this entire new series. And thanks to my professors at Tyler, who taught me raising, I actually had a good grasp on how to raise. This is raised out of 1/8-inch thick bronze. Stupid. This is actually what got me evicted from that studio on the left, which allowed me to find the studio I now have. Anyway, this is the year of the perforations. This is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And it's sterling silver on the inside and just the raw signs. The idea is that the signs, you see the reflection of the signs when you look in through the hole from the reflection in the silver. And this actually, James Thurman actually helped me on that load on the top up there. Was the largest single load I ever had the good luck of intercepting and buying. So as you're aware, and I've devoted most of my career now is traffic sign stuff. And this is how it used to come in these huge trucks, and I basically have to bribe them to come by my studio, and I'd have to get the crew together to unload them in their constrained time frame of maybe 2 hours. In this case, it was 2 hours. And then pay them much more than the next guy. That was the bribe. They just wanted money. What started out with, call me when there are signs and give them a case of beer, now turned into money. And so now I always have feelers out, and even from a talk like this, somebody will go home and talk to somebody who will talk to somebody, and then I'll get an email, hey, I hear you're looking for signs. Well, I know where there's a dumpster, and I'll be like, ooh, and I'll follow up, and I'll eventually try to get them. So that's an ever-increasing challenge, especially in Providence, where it's very, shall we say, political. How do you say mafia without saying mafia? It's very, very political. And a lot of these scrap yards, they won't let me, they take only cash, they won't let me take photo, they won't give me a receipt, and it's really kind of dicey. In this case, I actually ordered a truck. They brought me, I think, 20,000 pounds. They brought me on an 18-wheeler truck, and they said I had an hour to unload the pallets, and I couldn't cut the pallets, so I had to rent a forklift truck and learn how to drive it an hour before they arrived. It was a trip. And that's actually what I really like about this whole thing. There's always something. This is our last load from Newport, the city of Newport, Rhode Island, 7,000 pounds. That's how we get them. And then we triage them. Hard part's getting them there. These guys actually delivered. I love when they do that. I don't have to deal with renting a truck. And that's Rob on the right. He's my studio manager. Great guy. Next to James, I even told this to James, he's my next favorite assistant. Best assistant I ever had in a long time. So what we do is we catalog them kind of like a librarian. I catalog them, triage them, and then bring them in the back door. And this is kind of what our studio looks like. You see the scrap on the left that I turn into coasters. The idea in the studio is it's almost like a joke on recycling. It's like the Native Americans used to do with a bison. They'd use every damn piece of it because they brought it down. They're not wasters, and that's the way I am. Excuse me. Because of the amount of effort that it takes to get all this stuff in, it's very valuable to me because it's taken so much of my resources, time and money, that I need to design things that I can use with the ever-decreasing sizes of the bits. So anyway, backing up, this is where I started raising these pieces. I brought a sample into the class earlier of this actual physical, raised stuff, and this is the spark of the idea. Critics started writing about it. I started getting in amazing shows, and people started buying these for thousands of dollars, and I knew I had something. I mean, there are so many layers to this. The thing that I really loved about the signs was that a child could appreciate it. There's so much familiarity with it. And yet, somebody who has a design degree can appreciate kind of the finer nuances of how the graphics go together. Metalsmiths can appreciate it. Enamelists can appreciate it because there's glass in here. It's kind of like an urban enamel. It's a new enamel. So anyway, with the scrap, I started developing different ways to use it. In this case, I'd put them in a hydraulic press, squish them together, and then rivet them and turn them on the lathe. In this case, I made a weight lift. I used to play at lifting weights. I didn't know what I was doing, but I always thought it was really kind of funny to use all this scrap as dead weight. So I got a bum load of signs that I didn't know what to do with extrusion. So at the time I was renovating my building, I needed floor tiles, so I started making floor tiles. So Hue Manufacturing, developing a hybrid. Human skill in manufacturing. This is exactly, I think this is my niche. And I just want to also point out that a lot of the success of our studio has to do with our photographers. I can't begin to stress the importance of having a really, really good photographer, because much of what we do is seen not in person, but through the web, through magazines, through billboards. Without a good photo, you don't have a shot in hell. And it's worth the money. And thanks to this guy, Dean Powell, I got fellowships and grants and publicity. Anyway, back to Hue Manufacturing. So this is the first time I've ever seen it in print. And Chris Leftheri wrote a book by Rotovision in England on metal. It's kind of a modern kind of treatise on different metal terminology and techniques. And I didn't even know this was going to be a big deal, but he pinged me for this through email, and eventually this came out, and it was amazing. Here was this term that I had just kind of thrown around, was actually seen in print for the first time, which is now my registered trademark. Hue Manufacturing really has to do with, like the crafts, a lot of the crafts, it really has to do with humans. And James is down here somewhere on the left. I have a wall, kind of a wall of honor in my studio, that every assistant that's helped me has a photo and a name. And the wall, I have 15-foot ceilings, and this thing goes all the way up. And it reminds me that this is about the people, not just about the work. That's why I'm in it. And the people that come in my studio, they leave their spirit in there. And every person that comes adds a little something to it. Curtis was the guy, let's see if he's in here, right there on the right slide, third row down on the left, he says Curtis, and he's pointing at that. He was the guy that realized, through being excited about what goes on in the studio, that you can heat the signs to a certain temperature and they will bend much better. And the film, the plastic film on them, bends with the material. Every person has added one element. And that's the one thing that makes my studio, I think, special, is that, yes, we have machines. Oh, who's this? Oh, that's James. With, by the way, a ponytail down to his ass. Oh, wait, there's another one. Isn't that great? Round of applause. James Thurman! Ooh! And just as an aside, I haven't seen this slide for a long time, but if you look behind the anvil on the right there, it's an aquarium, a fish aquarium. How weird is that? A fish aquarium next to the hammering table. What was I thinking? Anyway. So these are the people that are currently with me, Tracy on the right, and Rob. And this is us kind of working in the shop. We had a big job for Keen, making 140 benches for point of purchase. When you go to try on Keen shoes, chances are you place your ass down on a stool, we made it. Which is kind of cool. Job for Comedy Central, 1,400 coaster sets. So I think, and there's the Keen bench. I think that after a while, once it reaches like a critical mass, once people know where to find you and you have kind of a cool thing. Now, I had no inkling that recycling was going to be a cool thing. I was doing it just because I was a recycler and I thought it was a cool material. How lucky was that it's like the cool, trendy thing now. Everybody and their sister's opening a boutique to do with green. I get so many inquiries. And they all know where to find me because of the next piece of advice I give you is get a great website. That's Tracy looking cheerful. That's probably the first one we made. She doesn't look so cheerful after the 140th one. So this is a big part of our field is that you have to learn to sell yourself. I mean, in a weird sort of way, I'm standing in front of you. I'll tell you, I am the most stage frightened guy in high school. I used to faint when I'd have to get up to give an answer, quite honestly. And so now I've realized that, you know what, it's just not going to fly. You have to learn to represent yourself. And that's actually, somebody asked me in an earlier class, how do you get all these contacts to sell your work? Easy way to do it is to actually do the trade shows and learn to deal with people and be outgoing, be professional, and kind of make connections. And until recently, that's what I used to do. This is how I learned to start jobbing things out to a spinner. This is actually a series of lamps that I designed. And at one point, I was so sick of hammering out that lamp shade that I said, oh, screw it, I'll get a spinner. And that made the connection. And there's my spinner on the right, Steve. He's still the guy that spins them. There's me looking very earnest with the quality control. So the spinning and commercial part of this, getting these things produced, has actually opened a lot of doors in that now I can start playing with multiples on a larger scale. For instance, like interiors. This was the best business deal I ever did. I know we have 10 minutes, right?
No, it's over now.
Oh.
We have to let them go.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. In 10, right?
No.
Oh, no, okay. Anyway, I'll leave you then with the best business deal. I sold the signs that we unloaded that time back to the Pennsylvania Transportation Authority for something like 3,000% increase. Anyway, I will show you. Just go quickly through the different furniture things. That's my new chair design, a couple years old now. And this you got to see. This is the life part. Well, I met my wife in med school, and she got pregnant. And so I designed on the right here, it's the she spoon, he spoon, and we spoon. Great for your coffee. You can stir in your milk. There's my wife in labor. And that's the fruits of our labor, I guess. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we do it. So I'll end you on that. So thanks.